Simon says subscribe and click on the bell icon to receive notifications.
Power BI, in a nutshell, is a business intelligence tool. That's what the letters BI stand for. But it's going to allow you to analyze your data. It's going to allow you to crunch it. It's going to allow you to see relationships between your data. And it's ultimately going to allow you to have nice visualizations and reporting around your data. It was developed by Microsoft. What it does is it allows you to not only take all the data that you have, but combine it and then also visualize your data so you can make nice pretty charts and graphics to be able to share all of these insights in a much more easy to understand, but also a way to interact with your data as well and have your audience do the same. Now, some of the key features of Power BI are essential to really understand not only what Power BI can do, but what we're going to cover in this class. So one of the first things we're going to discuss and demonstrate is data connectivity. When you start off Power BI, you're going to see it's going to ask you to connect to a data source. And those different types of data sources can be an Excel database, it can be an Access database, an Oracle database, or potentially you're using a third-party cloud service, even PDFs or text files. Once you bring it in and connect your data, you can then transform that data, you can clean it up, and then you can what we call model it, meaning that you can connect and relate that data to other data sources, having a much more complex, more complicated, and more robust data analysis tool. Then finally, you can visualize your data. You can create interactive and compelling visualizations to then display your data for your audience. And it can also be very interactive. There are many different types of visuals, including charts, pie graphs, tables, maps, etc. So you'll see that they're very robust, but then also very eye-catching and very professional. You will see that you can build various reports, generating details and uncovering insights and trends, and also you can use Power BI's patented Q&A system that uses natural language queries. So you can ask it bits of information in natural language and it'll analyze your data and then give you different answers based off of what it's found inside of your data. Finally, it allows you to collaborate and share all of your data. So you can share your insights by publishing the reports, even publishing the dashboards, and your audience can see it online and whatever platform you decide to share it. You can also collaborate. So your team can see all of your data in real time, and then you can make these decisions together, and then also potentially even make updates together with your team. And lastly, mobile accessibility. You can access all your reports, your dashboards, all of your original data on the go using mobile apps for both iOS and also Android. So if you're ready, let's go ahead and start analyzing with Power BI. When you first open up Power BI, you're going to see one very important option asking for your attention, which is to get data. Essentially, Power BI is going to need you to connect to other data sources so you can begin to analyze them. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Let's click on Get Data, and you're going to see that Power BI gives you a number of different types of data that you can connect to. An Excel document, TXTs, CSVs, XML, PDFs, and all kinds of other different data types. And you'll notice on the left-hand side you can filter it out by those different types of data types, giving you a little bit more accessible options. But I'm going to come back to all, and what I'm going to do for this first exercise is bring in an Excel document so I can start to analyze it. So I'm going to just double click on that, and I'm going to go over here to my class folder, double click on Customer Master, and you can see it starts to connect, and that's going to bring up to this dialog box called the Navigator, and you'll see that here is the name of my Excel file, and then here are the name of the sheets within that Excel document. So if I click on this little checkbox here, you're going to see on the right hand side is the name of that worksheet, and then all of the data, you're going to see all my column headings, etc. up there. And if I scroll down, you'll see more or less a truncated version of all my data, but it looks pretty good and I'm pretty happy with that. Now on the bottom, I have two choices. I could either just load it up and then say, great, we're going to go directly into Power BI, or I can transform the data. Transforming the data is essentially going to allow us to kind of control what's in there before we start analyzing it. Maybe you want to filter out some elements. Maybe you need to clean it up because the data format isn't correct. Maybe you want to remove things altogether. Who knows? But just to be safe, let's go ahead and transform the data and just see what it's going to look like and what kind of things might we want to change. Now, when we get to this new window, I want you to notice we're now in a different program called Power Query Editor. All right, so even though we started off in Power BI, we're now borrowing all the powers of this program to be able to make some potential changes here. So you're going to see here is a nice little preview of all my data, all the columns, etc. On the left-hand side, you can see there is the worksheet that I started with. On the right-hand side, there it is one more time. And then over here on the other right-hand side, you're going to see are these applied steps. Keep an eye on this as I start to make some changes. Well, what are these changes I might want to make? Well, you know what? I don't actually like how customer ID has no spaces. So what I'm going to do is very simply double click inside that column heading. And you're going to notice how it gets all highlighted. So I could just type right over this if I want to, or just very simply click right there, hit a space, hit enter, and now it's new. Okay, different column heading. Now, I want you to notice here is renamed column. It's keeping track of all the steps that I'm making. Every time I make a change, you're going to see this coming down here. Now that's going to be really valuable in case you change your mind. And you can go even back all the way to where you started. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and click on this little X and it comes right back to before the spaces. Pretty neat. Now, let's go ahead and see another way I can do exactly what I just did, but then introducing you to what I like to call kind of the culture of Power BI is by right-clicking, and you're going to see a lot of options here. A lot of things are going to make very intuitive sense, like removing columns, duplicating columns, removing duplicates, even like changing the type of the data you can do all right here. Lots and lots of really great things. But what I'm going to do is just rename it once again, same deal, and then just add in another space, hit enter, and I'm good to go. Beautiful. The other thing I want to do is change the data type. So you'll notice here this says 1, 2, 3, ABC, etc. And this is how Power Query and Power BI have read this data. So what I'm going to do is very simply do a left click on the 1, 2, 3, and you're going to notice this takes me directly to all my data types I can transform to. And you know what? This is actually not really a number. All it is just plain old text. So I'm going to convert that to text. Beautiful. Love that. And notice it even says change the type. Super happy with that. Now let's go ahead and just drag across here. Let's do a few other things. I don't want fax number anymore, so I can just very easily right click and just say remove. Beautiful. Good to go. Let's just do some other kind of quick ones here. I'll just change this from phone number just to phone, and then I'll just add a little space here, hit enter, and then change this one to store. I'll say store name. Love that. And I'm pretty much good to go at this point. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to bring this into Power BI. Because remember, we're still inside Power Query. We're doing all the transformation, and it's lovely. We're very happy how this went. So I'm going to bring this into Power BI so I can start to analyze it. I can start to organize it, maybe even make connections, and doing some visualizations. So how do I do that? Well, let's go ahead and go over here to the upper left. You're going to notice there is a little drop down under Close and Apply, and I'm just going to say Close and Apply. Now, what does that mean? Well, I click on that, and you're going to see that a whole bunch of things are going to start happening. It's going to load up, right? Very happy. It's bringing it up. It's very happy with all the transformation, 663 rows brought in, and now you're going to see ostensibly nothing really happens. So it might feel like you did something wrong, but I want you to see over here on the left-hand side is these three little icons, and we want to focus on this one right here for right now. When I click on that, I just want you to notice that I'm now inside of table view. We're going to go a little bit deeper in these in just a little bit in the next lesson, but I just want you to do this exercise and not get a little frightened when you say, hey, wait a second, what happened? Where's my data? You can see there's my table view. And we can confirm that all the things that I did here, adding on the space, that's there. You can see there's store name, there's no fax number anymore. Everything looks great. Okay, so pause the video, practice this, and we'll come back and we'll see you in the next lesson. Let's pick up where we left off, where we imported this master customer data into Power BI after transforming it. And we left off where we were just in this table view. So I want to use this as an opportunity to give you a little overview of how Power BI's interface works. Currently, I'm inside of Table Tools, just by default. Now immediately, I don't really need any of these things. I'm not going to be doing any calculations. Here is the name of that sheet that I worked with initially. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave here right away and go over here to Home. And you're going to see here I have the opportunity to get more data. Here's an Excel workbook, essentially allowing me to get data from an Excel workbook, and then also getting more data in addition to that. Now, what this is going to allow me to do is bring it all into this actual Power BI document. Now you'll notice here is also transform data. Well, let's say I changed my mind about a lot of these things and I want to transform it yet again. So what I can do is just transform this data, and then it's going to take me back to that dialog box where I was just in the last lesson. Now, what I want you to notice is very important is that on the left-hand side, you're going to notice there's the report view, there's the table view, which we're currently in, and then here is the model view. Well, what I'm going to do is just simply click on report view. And I want you to keep an eye on my ribbon. When I click on that, everything changes. Okay, you'll notice here I start to get more and more options here. Okay, some of these things certainly do overlap, but because this is a different tool altogether, allowing me to build visuals with my data, you're going to see that things are going to change a little bit. Okay, but you're going to see that there's more kind of pertinent specific options for the visuals I'm going to create. And you'll notice on the right hand side there's a whole section just about visualizations. If I click over to here to model view, you're going to see how this is going to allow me to start creating what we call connections between our data, so then we can build what we call a data model, so we can combine different tables together, therefore combining our analysis to see more complex data reporting. All right, so I just want you to understand initially how all this stuff works, because it could be a little bit confusing and a little bit of a departure of what you're used to. Now, if you look on the lower left part of the window, you're going to see we have all tables. You can create an additional table if you want to right here. I go over to here back to the table view. Notice how that disappears. I go to my visualization. Notice how I have page 1, and then I have this little plus sign here. So each of these is their own sort of little mini component. At this point, just pay attention to that. Understand how there is a little bit of a nuance within Power BI within each of these components. In this lesson, we're going to pick up where we left off, working with this master customer data. Now, I know that I have some other data that I'd like to eventually relate to this data, because there's some data that's going to provide some invoice information that I want to combine with all of this. Now, all I do very simply from my Home tab is get more data. Now, I happen to know that I have this data in a TXT file. I also have it as an Excel file, but I want you to see how we can get data from both file formats. So if I click on Get Data, you're going to see here I have this text or CSV file. I click on that, and now it's going to take me to my class folder, and you're going to see very simply is this invoice data.txt. I double click on that, and it's going to take us to something slightly different than what we saw before. Because now this is a text file, it's going to look a little bit different, but guess what? I have the same option to be able to transform this data or load the data. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and just say transform the data. And there you have it. Now, some things have changed. You're going to notice here that my queries, in addition to the master customer, I now have invoice data. You're going to see here this data looks exactly the same. My workspace and ribbon looks exactly the same, and all my options are exactly the same. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. I'm going to right click on it, and then very simply I'm going to just choose delete, and then that data set is gone. The whole query is gone, and then I can go right back to where I was before. I'm going to go ahead and say close and apply. And this time I'm going to bring in that same set of data as an Excel workbook, and then we're going to go next level with the different types of transformations that we can do. So this time I'm just going to choose Excel workbook. I'm going to bring in invoices, and the data is exactly the same. And once again, I'm going to choose invoice data. I'm going to choose transform data, and we're going to go a little bit deeper with certain options that we can do within our Power Query Editor. So let's go ahead and take a look at this data here. I don't actually need this to be a number. I'm going to go ahead and change that to text. That's great. I'm going to go ahead and say replace current. That's great. All it's doing is basically saying, hey, you know what? There was a step there to bring it all in. I don't want to have a new step for that. I just want to replace the original step that came in terms of actually bringing in the data. All right, so let's go over here to our customer ID. Same situation. I'm going to make this text, replace current. And now let's go over to here to a little bit further to the right. And I want you to notice something kind of interesting. The data that I'm bringing in has all of my months and days and my years all separated out. And then notice how they're also as numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge this data together. So we're going to learn about something a little bit more advanced than what we've already covered. Because certainly we can change all the different formats and all that stuff, but when something comes in as separate columns, it's going to be a little bit of a different process. Okay, so how do we do this? So the first thing I want to tell Power Query is that I would like to merge the month combined with the day and then combining with the years. So what we have to do is we have to select each column heading in the order that we want it to ultimately be displayed as. So I'm going to choose month. I'm going to hold down the control key, click day. So again, the order that I select these things is going to be very important. And lastly, I'm going to choose year. Okay? And now I'm going to go over here to this new tab we have not discussed yet, is transform. And then finally, merge columns. See there, that is right in the middle. This is going to pop up. And it's going to say, hey, listen, you have a separator, something's going on there. How do I know when I bring it in how you want these to be merged? If you say none, essentially they're all just going to come in as 112023. I don't want that. I want them to come in as a /. Very nice. And then notice here it's going to give me a column name. I'm just going to go ahead and just say date of purchase. And then very simply click OK. And now we'll see something pretty magical that just happened. Notice all of those other columns have disappeared and they merged together into one. Now, am I done yet? No, because the data type is still text. So very simply, I can just simply left click on that ABC and then just change that to date. And now when I bring it in, it's going to be a date, and then it's going to look at it as a date. It's going to treat it as a date in terms of a timeline. And it's going to do that for every single aspect inside of this data set. Now understand that the counterpart to merging individual columns is the ability to split columns. And you can see, there it is, split columns, and you can split it by a delimiter. So if you wanted to do the opposite of this, your delimiter would be that /, and then it would find all the /, and then it would separate them out. So we'd have one in one column, another one in another column, and 2023 in another column. Pretty neat. Okay, now let's go ahead and transform our sales into dollars. Very simply, left click on that, and we're going to say fixed decimal number. That's great. See a little $sign pops up. And then let's just take a look at maybe one or two other things before we leave here that you may want to do. Notice here is this text columns, and then right next to split columns is this ability to do format. So if I click on description here and I go back over to here to format, notice here if I wanted to make everything in lowercase, uppercase, capitalize each word, I can very, very easily do that. So if I just try that right now, I'm going to say capitalize each word. Notice how everything is now capitalized. If I change my mind, I can very easily come back to that, and it's a giant undo for that. All right, beautiful. So let's go ahead and just say back to home, close and apply, close and apply. And you can see it's loading everything in. Beautiful. And now, how many data sets do I have? Well, let's look on the right-hand side. There's my invoice data. There's my master customer. And if we open this up, you're going to see there's all my column headings. And also notice how it designates each of the numbers with this little sigma, saying that these in fact can be calculated. I click on this, you're going to see, bam, there's all my different column headings. Let's come back over to here to table view, and my table view is for what is currently selected. Go over here to invoice data, my table view is for what is currently selected as well. So very good. Now we have two data sets to work with to then create a relationship between the two of them to be able to then analyze it.
Hi, from everyone at Simon Says It. We hope you're enjoying this training lesson. Please like this video to show your support for the channel. If you want to take your learning further, earn a certificate for this course, and gain access to over 200 courses ad-free, click up there and go to simonsaysit.com. Thanks for watching, and back to the course.
Now, one thing some of you may have noticed is that my date of purchase, it was a date initially in terms of the format, but then it got reverted back to just plain old text. If I wanted to at this point, I could retransform that data. I have a couple of choices here. So I'm back in my data set. I go back to home, and you'll notice here is transform data. Click on transform data and transform data again. And guess what? It takes me right back to where I was. And then very easily, I can go back to my invoice data, and then I will find this. And you can see here's my date of purchase. And then very easily, I can change this to date if I wanted to. Now, I'm going to show you another way you can do it in case you don't really feel like going back to Power Query. So I'm just going to go ahead and just say close and apply. Didn't really do anything, so nothing really to apply. Now, let's go back to our data set. And you're going to see I can go directly to my data purchase. And then you can see that within my column tools, it is going to tell me the data type and also the format right here. Well, right from here within Power BI, I can change the data type. I don't have to go back to Power Query to be able to accomplish that. So I click on my little drop down, and then look at that. Some familiar characters right there is date. And then you're going to see here, data type change. With this data type change, your data will be stored differently. This may cause a loss of data or precision. After you make this change, you can restore the column by refreshing the data. I'm going to say yes, I want to do that. And you can see here, beautiful, that comes in. And then for the format, all I want to do is change it to a different type of date format. But just notice how smart it is. It recognizes this is the date, and now it's going to go even deeper to say, hey, listen, what kind of date format do you want? I'm going to choose that one. And then bam, it transforms it to the way I wanted to initially. So really nice to know that we don't have to go back into a place that's potentially unfamiliar or something you're not really comfortable with. You can just stay right in here. It also might save you a little bit of time. In this lesson, we are going to get data from the web. And you'll notice here is a website from Stats America that shows us all the different population numbers for each individual state ranked in order. You'll notice also here is a Wikipedia page that's also got a whole list of different state information, and also come down a little bit more and you see there's even more state information. Now, what do these websites have in common is that they're all in a table format, and that's very important. That is what Power BI is looking for. So what I'm going to do is very simply copy this, go back over to Power BI, and then I'm going to come over here to my Home tab. I'm still in the same exact file. Come to my Home tab, click on Get Data, and you're going to see down here is Web. And then very simply just going to ask you, hey, what's the URL? I'm going to paste that in, click OK. Now you're going to see it's just finding the internet, it's looking for it. Let's say, hey, where's that website? And you see it's going to bring up a whole bunch of stuff on the left-hand side. And then notice that word tables. So if I click on this here, you're going to see that whether you realize it or not, there are tables on that website. Click on this one, you can see there's another table right there. I don't want either of these things. I do want this one. And if you have a lot of data on here, it may require a little bit of clicking around, but most of the time it's pretty obvious. So you can see here, there is all the data that I showed you on the website. I can scroll down, I can see most of it, if not all of it. You can see that there are two tabs up on top. One is table view, and this is showing us all the data, all stripped down of any kind of formatting. And you can see here to the right of that is web view. And you can see this is kind of nice because it's giving us confirmation what it looks like in reality on the website. Pretty neat, very cool. So I'm just going to very simply now transform this data, and you're going to see it's going to take me back to something very similar as I saw with my Excel file and also my TXT file. And you can see I can remove some of these things. I could change this to whatever it needs to be. And what I'm going to do next is just very simply remove this. So I'm just going to right click on there and I'm going to say remove. Second choice down, it goes away. I don't really need that. Now that's here. Let's go ahead and take a look at another way for us to bring in more data. We're going to use that same one that we saw before. Let's come back to here. And we're going to use this one this time. And because this one has two different tables, we're going to see what that's going to look like when there's more data for us to work with. So you can see there is state and territory rankings. I come down here. This is going to be population of state territories and regions, possibly a little bit more information, decade over decade by the census and some other percent changes. Pretty neat, super helpful information. So I'm going to copy this. And then let's go back to where we just were in Power Query this time. Now we're going to get data from here and then add it to our queries. And this time we're going to do it from new source and then say web. So we're essentially accomplishing the same thing, but from a slightly different vantage point. All right, so I just want you to kind of understand that there's different ways to accomplish the same thing that may save you a little bit of time. So I'm going to choose web, and then same dialog box pops up. I'm going to paste that in, click OK, and then click on connect. Now let's wait for it. It's connecting, it's going into the internet, it's finding everything there, it's finding that website, and you can see a lot more stuff popping up here, a lot more tables, but you can see here is this particular table, really nice, that's great. Here is this particular one, no, I definitely don't want that one, and here is this one. Say, okay, that's kind of interesting, all right, really nice, cool. I happen to like this one, right, a lot more data in there, so I'm going to click OK. That's going to appear here. So if we look at this here, we're going to see that this particular data needs a little bit of work. So what are we talking about here? Well, because it's coming in from the web, it's coming in from some place that, hey, you know what? I didn't really write this. It's not coming from a place that's like designed to be extracted out, like maybe a professional database that you're paying money for. And we may have to do some other types of transformation. In this case, I just want to remove these rows. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it so this is going to be the first row. So what I'm going to do to fix this is very simply say used first row as headers. So I click on that little drop down. You can see use first row as headers, use headers as first rows. Well, no, I actually want the first row as the headers. I click on that, and then that is going to replace everything we see here. Beautiful. And then, of course, you can make whatever kind of data format changes you want, the labeling of it, all that good stuff, right? Lovely, looks amazing. And then I'm done. I'm going to say close and apply. It's going to take me back to Power BI. Both of them are loading up now. Even though they're from the web, it's the same exact process, and we learned how to bring them in as well as doing different types of transformations. And you can see I have my invoice data, my master column data, and then I have these two. Okay, now I'm going to get rid of these. I don't actually need these. This is just for the purposes of the exercises and to show you how you can bring in different types of data. But I'm going to show you how you can remove these very, very easily. If you right click on it, we're going to say delete from model, say yes. And now we're just back to the remaining queries, our invoice data and our master customer, and feeling good and now ready to create a data model or a relationship between these two data sets so I can start doing some pretty fancy analysis. In many instances, looking at your data, you may want to do some calculations. So for example, in this data, I'd like to calculate all of my sales and know the total amount of sales I have. I'd also like to do the same thing with quantity. In Power BI, they allow you to do that using measures. Now, if you move your mouse over, new measure, you're going to see write a DAX expression that calculates a value from your data. Now, in this lesson and the next lesson, we're going to give you a quick little introduction to what DAX formulas look like. So what I'm going to do is to create a measure to add up all of my sales and then all of my quantity, and then later on, we're going to combine the two to find out what our total sales are, combining with all of our quantities. So let's go out over here and go to new measure, and you're going to see that that comes up working on it, and then we have this measure. Now what's happening here is that it's going to ask us to actually name the measure. If you don't go over this and then you start creating what we're going to create and you don't replace measure, it's going to come in with the word measure. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say total sales, and then I'm going to go after the equal sign here, and I'm just going to type out sum, and then that's going to pop up, and I'm just going to hit the tab key. And now notice that all of my column headings and all of my tables now pop up after I hit the tab key. Now you could type out sum and then open parentheses, and these will still come up. If you've ever worked with Excel, this should probably look familiar to you. Now what I'm going to do is just very simply sum up all of my sales that lives inside of the invoice data table. And now I am done. So I've created that, and now you'll notice I have a new data point here. You can see is total sales, and then notice how this looks a little bit different. It looks like this little calculator. This looks like a calculator. That's a new measure. Let's go ahead and do that same exact thing. I'm going to say new measure, and I'm going to do that for quantity, but this time I'm going to keep measure in there so you can see what I mean from before. Let me say measure equals, I'm going to say sum, hit the tab key, and then I'm going to sum up all of quantity, and then I'm done, and then guess what? It still says measure there. So that was what I was talking about before in case that wasn't clear. So very easily I can rename that, and I'll just say total quantity, and now problem solved. Now you can see here I have my total quantity and my total sales. And that's how you do measures. Now, you could just keep this as is and you love that. That's great. And it's going to give you a total of all of these. And when you start doing all your data visualization, these will be available for you to then incorporate into your data visuals, to doing your charts and doing your tables and everything. And they'll be available. They're not showing up here quite yet because we have not made a new column out of it. And that's what we're going to do after this, and we're going to see a new column combining the two of these with multiplication using a DAX formula. Following up on our last exercise where we wanted to combine both quantity and sales to find the total sales using a DAX formula, let's go ahead and create the new column that's going to incorporate it into our table. So very simply, I'm going to right-click on my column headings and then just say new column. Now if you wait about 2 seconds, you're going to see now over here in my formula bar I'm going to have this column equals. Now I don't want that to be called column, so again I have to override that. I'm going to say sales x quant. You can call it whatever you want, and then I'm going to say equals. Now here comes the fun part. I'm going to just type out the word CAL, and you're going to see that calculate now appears. Okay, as soon as you see calculate, just go ahead and hit the tab key. Now I'm ready to do some type of calculation. It needs to see my expression for what my calculation is going to be. Now, rather than having to do anything complicated or hunting for it, I know that my data with these two measures that I'm working with live inside my invoice data table. So if I just type out IN, you're going to see, bam, that pops right up, and you're going to see there's invoice data and those two measures that I want to incorporate into this formula. So I'm going to now hit the tab key as soon as I can see total quantity highlighted. Bam, there you go, saving me a lot of typing and a lot of mistakes. I'm going to multiply that by, and I'm going to type out INV, and then invoice data, total sales comes up. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Now let's double check our syntax. You're going to see here we are calculating invoice data, that is the total quantity measure, by the total sales measure that I created. Okay? And then again, what is my column heading going to be called? Sales by quantity. Because remember how I started this by saying I wanted to do a new column, and this new column just happened to have a calculation inside of it. So let's go ahead now and hit the enter key, and let's just see what that did. And you can see beautifully, there it is, 54 times 4 is 208. Let's see here, again, 10 by 250, it's 2,500. Beautiful, everything looks great and fantastic. This is really powerful, giving me a lot of great information that not only can I see here in my table, but very soon in my data visualization. When working with multiple tables, there's going to be a time when you're going to want to relate those tables so you can essentially borrow one bit of data from another. So for example, if we look at these two data tables, you're going to see I have my invoice data and you're going to see I have my master customer data. Now I may want to look at this data, but then also take some of this data that's here about my invoices, but then take maybe the phone number information or the state information and then bring it over into here. Currently, they are two separate data sets, so therefore I would not be able to get all the information. When you relate or create data models between your data, you're able to get a more robust and more comprehensive story about your data. So what we're going to do now is we're going to switch over from our table view and come over here to our model view. When I click on that, you're going to notice that something has already happened, and it's happened automatically. I did not actually have to do anything to create these relationships. Now, what we see here are our two data sources. And you'll notice here that there's this line that's connecting between our two data sources. Well, that line is allowing a relationship to happen between these two data sources. Now, what is this relationship and how are they even finding that relationship? Well, because I have my customer ID here and I have a customer ID over here, we will see that they are able to relate to each other based off of that commonality. So let's go back over to our table view. And we're going to see here I have this customer ID. I come back over to master customer. I also have customer ID. You can't really tell right now because they are not in the same order, but they are in fact the same bits of information. But what's interesting about this is that this is all of our customers, but then the invoice data is all the behaviors of the customers. So one customer can have several different invoices. So let's come back over to here to customer ID under invoice data. And then this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort it ascendingly. Now as I scroll down, you're going to see I have lots and lots of ones. I have lots of 1015. All these customer numbers, they have made multiple purchases all throughout the span of my store. So that's great. So I can see that. So essentially, we're going to have a one-to-many relationship. So if I come back over to my model view, I want you to notice here is this little line that's connecting the two. Now I'm just going to mouse over this little center bit right there, and then notice how customer ID lights up. Let's go ahead and just maybe move this a little bit like that so you can see what's going on here. I want you to notice also there's this one, and then there's this little asterisk. This is saying one to many. I have one customer that has many invoice experiences, essentially, right? So we're basically looking at one customer that has purchased many, many things many times. Okay, so that's fantastic. That's really helpful. And again, that's going to allow me to tell a more robust story because my master customer data may want to get some of that invoice data, borrow it, and then create more complex and much more vivid stories around this data. Now let's see how we can interact with this just a little bit more. I'm just going to click in this little gray area, making sure that none of my data sets are selected. And you're going to notice here I have these properties. And one thing I like to do is pin related fields to the top of the card. So that way I kind of know which one's which. So you can see that. It's always going to be there on top because maybe it's buried over there. Now, it should be noted that they do not have to have the same exact name. It just happens to be, in this case, that they are, in fact, both customer ID. If the date is the same, then it will be able to be related to. Okay? Now, let's say, for example, this did not happen automatically. If you wanted to relate something, all you have to do is just drag that field on top of the other field. So as an example, let's go ahead and just delete this relationship. I'm going to right-click on it, choose delete, say yes. And now, watch what I'm going to do is just simply drag customer ID on top of customer ID. And now, bam, I've now created that relationship. Now, what you're probably all asking is, well, how did this relationship get created? Well, I've got some good news for you. Power BI is so smart, it's able to recognize relationships without me even asking for it. So let me show you where this is. So let's go up to the File menu, come down here to Options and Settings. And then we're going to go over here to Options, and then under this Current File section, we're going to click on Data Load, and you're going to see that this box is checked that says Auto Detect New Relationships after data is loaded. I click on this little information button. After data is loaded, try to discover relationships between tables that currently don't have any and create them. So because I had this already checked, it automatically found the relationships for me, saving me a lot of time, a lot of energy, and really having to think too much about it. So it's already done that for me. So if yours isn't doing that, always come back to the options menu and then see if it's turned on or not. And if it isn't, go ahead and turn it on and see if that helps you. I'm going to go ahead and click OK, get out of this, and then return back to my table view. And one thing I want you to notice is that in every one of these tabs, there is a very fast way to get back to managing your relationships. Notice here is this Manage Relationships instead of Column Tools, Table Tools, Manage Relationships, under Home, also Manage Relationships right there in the middle. When you click on that, you're going to see it's going to take you to a little bit of a different interface. So you can see here it's coming from one table, which is my invoice data, customer ID, which is our field, and then master customer, which is our data table, and then here's our field once again. So if I wanted to edit this, notice it's going to take me to a little bit of a different dialog box, and maybe you want to work with it a little bit more sort of intricately or really understand a little bit in a different way compared to how we were over here in this tab. You can do that very nicely. And you can see here is our cardinality, which is our many to one. Maybe you want to reverse that. Maybe you want to do something a little bit different. You have the option to do that just by clicking on that Manage Relationships. Now, if it isn't showing and maybe your auto detecting isn't working or whatever it is through the program, you can try auto detecting here. And you can also go to New, and then you can create it yourself if you like. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of that, close out of that, and then come right back here once again just to remind us where we came from. And just a couple of last things I'm going to show you here within the model view is that this right-hand menu is context sensitive, meaning that depending on what we click on, we're going to get different sets of options. Earlier, I had us click on nothing, and then we saw all the properties for all the cards. If I click on one of the cards, you're going to notice here I have the opportunity to change the name, add on a description, etc. If I click on one of the fields, notice you have the same opportunity here as well. Okay, so this could help you in terms of searching and collaboration and organization, just to be able to kind of know what things are and to be able to be on the same team as you're working with these. Now, sometimes you might want to hide them. You might want to change some of the same settings that you did within the table view in terms of the data type and the format and all that good stuff. Just know that you can do that here, just like doing it inside the table view. Practice this with your own data, with my data, and understand why we create relationships, understand how easy it is to create relationships, and also remembering how Power BI will create relationships for you automatically. And then once you've done that, just note how you can delete them, you can edit them, you can put in different parameters around them, you can do all kinds of good stuff here to take ownership over your data for potentially telling your story in a more complex way and through collaboration.
If you're not a subscriber, click down below to subscribe so you get notified about similar videos we upload. To see the full course that this video came from, click over there. And click over there to see more videos from Simon Says It.